You can start.
Okay. This first song's called Your Love, and it's a song I wrote for my mom. And I'd love for you to join me in the chorus, and we can sing it to our Mother Earth. 2, 3, 4. This next one's called Mercy, Mercy Me by Marvin Gaye.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Abby Henry from Central Climate Action Club and Our Earth, Our Future. I'll be your co-facilitator for this event. You're listening to the Salty Quips, who are Jen Jenka, Josh Stoll, and Eli Bender. They'll play one more song and then we'll get started.
This last song we're going to sing is entitled Steve's Hammer for Pete, a song by Steve Earle in response to Pete Seeger's If I Had a Hammer. 1, 2, 3, 4. One of these days I'm gonna lay this hammer down, and I won't have to drag this weight around. When there ain't no hunger and there ain't no pain, I won't have to swing this thing. One of these days I'm gonna lay this hammer down. One of these nights I'm gonna sing a different tune, all night long beneath the silvery moon. When the war is over and the union's strong, we won't sing no more angry songs. One of these nights I'm gonna sing a different tune. Someday when my struggle's through and I won't have to strive, until then all I can do is let my hammer fly. One of these days I'm gonna lay this hammer down and leave my burden resting on the ground. When the air don't choke and the ocean's clean and kids don't die for gasoline, one of these days I'm gonna lay this hammer down. John Henry was a mighty man. He worked his whole life long, and he let his hammer ring. He always sang this song. Everybody, one of these days I'm gonna lay this hammer down, and I won't have to drag this weight around. When there ain't no hunger and there ain't no pain, I won't have to swing this thing. When the war is over and the union's strong, I won't sing no more angry songs. And the air don't choke and the ocean's clean, and kids don't die for gasoline. One of these days I'm gonna lay this hammer down. One of these days I'm gonna lay this hammer down.
Thanks so much, Salty Quips. That was great. Thanks for coming, everyone. We're excited to get started. I'd like to introduce you to our facilitator, Tamara Napoleon. Tamara is a member of the Saulteaux First Nations and an Indigenous lawyer who focuses on First Nations economic development, which, among many benefits, will also help return Indigenous women to their respected place of equality, respect, and prestige in their communities. We are honored to have her with us today.
Thank you, Abby. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge with respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose territory this discussion is occurring today, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. Today's event is organized jointly by For Our Kids, For Our Grandkids, and Parents for Climate. For Our Kids is a network of parents and grandparents in Canada fighting for a better world for our kids and grandkids. Their vision is a green, equitable, and just world where children can grow up safe and healthy. And they believe that in order to get there, all of us need to come together to advocate for it. For Our Grandkids is a group of grandparents based in Victoria, BC, that believes that the future of our grandchildren is in jeopardy because of climate change. They work collaboratively with other nonprofits to promote sustainability through workshops on fossil fuel divestment or by walking their grandkids to school instead of driving them, and helping to promote a green and just recovery from COVID-19. They are not afraid to talk to politicians and decision makers about the changes needed now, and they've got the time and energy to do it. Parents for Climate is a local group of committed, loving parents on the Lekwungen territory, united around the basic sense of duty every parent feels to ensure that our children have the best opportunities they can for a good, healthy, and prosperous life in a safe living environment. They are here to take bold, direct climate action for the sake of our children and all future generations. When we say we want a green and just recovery, what do we mean? COVID-19 is a warning of how devastating a planetary crisis can be. As we continue to tackle it, our kids and grandkids face potential waves of new crises, fires, floods, droughts, and global insecurity due to climate change. Canada's federal and provincial governments are putting billions of dollars into economic recovery. How they spend that money is critical to the kind of world our children will grow up in. Will it be a healthier, more sustainable, more just society, or will it further entrench the climate destruction and injustices that predated COVID-19? A green and just recovery would invest those funds in areas that provide good jobs while protecting and respecting the environment, and would be based on principles such as these that speak to the inequities and gaps we've been living with, made more evident through the pandemic crisis. We parents and grandparents have a huge role to play in calling on decision makers to focus on green and just principles to guide our recovery from the impact of the pandemic and transition to a new way of life. The global pandemic is a terrible crisis, but it does offer us an opportunity to restart our economy in a green and just manner for people and planet. I'd like to take a moment now to introduce our panelists. Chief Gordon Planis has been elected Chief of Sault Nation for the last 10 years. He sits on many boards encompassing the Salish Sea. Gordon's traditional name is Hayakwacha, named after his great-grandfather from Chianu, the Salmon people. He has previously been a logger, commercial fisherman, pipe fitter by trade, and a backcountry operations manager with Pacific Rim National Parks Reserve. Gordon is a Coast Salish artist and carver, traditional singer, and captain of Sauk traditional dugout canoes. Gordon and his wife, Marcella, live in the village of Seosan. They have 6 children and 6 grandchildren. He is actively working closely with the community and with renewable energy, food and water security, Coast Salish language revitalization, and economic development. Victoria Mayor Lisa Helps becomes the 52nd Mayor of Victoria when she was elected on November 15th, 2014, and was sworn into office for her second term on November 1st, 2018. Prior to being elected as mayor, she served as Victoria's City Councillor for 1 term from 2011 to 2014. Taking a long-term, big picture perspective, she looks both around the city and around the world for innovative solutions to the pressing challenges facing us, including climate change, lack of affordable housing, and growing social isolation and loneliness, especially amongst youth and seniors. Green Party MLA Adam Olsen was the member for Saanich North and the Islands and member of the BC Green Caucus from May 2017 to September 2020. He is currently the BC Green Party candidate seeking re-election to represent Saanich North and the Islands. Inspired by the incredible place and people he represents, Adam has a deep love and respect for his home in the Salish Sea. Twice elected as councillor in the district of Central Saanich, Adam has worked in his family businesses, from horticulture to Coast Salish knits. The result of 2 decades in the service and communication sectors is the valuable experience in building relationships, connecting people, problems, ideas, and solutions. Born in Victoria, BC, Adam has lived, worked, and played his entire life on the Saanich Peninsula. He's a member of Sartlip First Nation, where he and his wife, Emily, are raising their 2 children, Silas and Ella. Thank you very much all for being here today. After our panelists give us their vision on how their level of government can help usher in a green, just economy, they will each answer 3 questions, collated from the questions that you asked in our online participant survey.
Now, just before we hear what our panelists have to say, we want to mark the event with a quick picture. So if everyone can turn on their screens for a moment and make a heart with their hands like this. Ready, everyone? When I count to 3, Galen from Our Kids will take our picture. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Smile.
Got it, thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Abby and Galen. The next thing we'd like to do is have each of our panelists tell us briefly what they believe needs to happen for a green and just recovery at their level of government. Chief Planetist, can you please start us off?
Okay, it's great to be on here. I want to acknowledge the territories of Esquimalt and Songhees. I have a great-grandfather, Chief William Roberts, that came from Songhees on my mother's side. Does everyone hear me all right?
Yep.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, you know, when it comes to a green economy, a couple of things come to mind. I was taught you always got to look back to what we had and then compare it to now. And one of the things that come to mind is when you look at a green economy, you're thinking about lifestyle. I'm thinking about my ancestors' lifestyle 150 years ago, where there's an abundance of resources and there wasn't very much population. And if we thought about it that way, we actually went totally the reverse. We have a lot of population and we depleted a lot of resources. So when I look at a green recovery, I like to look at it in a way of learning from the past so we can go towards the future. And I'll leave it like that for now. Thank you, Haishka.
Thank you, Chief Planetist. Next, we'll hear from Mayor Lisa Helps on what she believes City of Victoria can do to help the economy recover in a green and just manner. Mayor Helps.
Great, thanks everybody. Good afternoon. I too am on Lekwungen territory. This Songhees and the Esquimalt Nations. Is there a weird echo or is the sound okay? Okay, thanks, Adam. Okay, thanks for the thumbs up. That's always reassuring. I'm so honored to be here today. It's the first Zoom call that I've ever been to that's begun with live music, and that makes such a difference. It welcomes us all, and for me, I didn't do email. I just wrote down the name of the Salty Quips so I can go find more of their music. It was really a way to call us all together into the present. So thanks for that. And I know our colleague Laurel Collins was going to be joining us today, but she's unable to. So we're missing the federal government, but I think, and they definitely have a role to play. Before I give my vision, I also want to observe that we're finally getting the balance right, because I'm the token non-Indigenous person on this panel. And I think that's a really good thing, because I think that the green and just recovery. Thanks, Adam. I'm glad you're laughing. That was meant to call things out in a humorous way, because I think if we're going to have a green and just recovery, it's got to be inclusive. It has to start fundamentally with inclusivity and equity at the heart of everything that we do. I think we've seen through COVID. Oh, I got a thumbs up. That's good. Hopefully, we can all give thumbs up to that, because we can talk talk about electric cars, we can talk about getting off fossil fuels, we can talk about all of these things, but if it doesn't mean everyone, and if everyone can't afford to buy the newest electric car, or, you know, get that new high-paying $70,000 to $80,000 green job, then we're going to fail. So for me, at the heart of a green and just recovery is that notion of equity. So what can cities do? Cities can do a lot and a little. You know, in order for cities to do everything that we need to be able to do, we need to change the Constitution of Canada, and that would take a really long time. So what we need to do is get creative within our constitutional powers. And so cities, as we all know, have control over things like the roads, the waste stream, building codes, and all of those things. And you know, if you're interested in the City of Victoria's Climate Leadership Plan, I'll put the link in the chat. So those are the basic things we can do. We can reduce emissions through buildings, transportation, and waste, and that's kind of become common sense. But going back to this notion of equity and inclusivity, the way we do these things, there's a huge role for cities to play in terms of who gets trained for some of these new jobs. How can we use our city's procurement policies to, and we're doing a great job on Vancouver Island through this amazing initiative called the Coastal Community Social Procurement Initiative, to make sure that as these jobs come up, as these city contracts come up, we're actually employing people who would have been left out of the economy. So I don't want to go on and on. I'm looking forward to the questions, but for me, cities have a role to play in reducing emissions, but in doing it in such a way that leaves no one behind, and not in a tokenistic way, but in a measurable way. One last thing, and again, I hope we talk about this a little bit, the way that we can measure whether or not we're successful is, are we getting closer to the UN Sustainable Development Goals? Because that path to a green and just recovery was laid out in 2015 by the UN, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals are a way of measuring that does leave no one behind if we do it right. So thanks for having me. I'm gonna listen now.
Thank you, Mayor Helps. We'll go last to Adam Olsen on how he sees the provincial government bringing in a green and just economy. Mr. Olsen.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you. And as I heard my relative from Tok speaking, I started to jot down notes. And then as I heard Lisa speaking, the Mayor Helps speaking, I was jotting down notes. And what I was going to say is now what I'm going to say. It's changed. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm here as I mostly am on the beautiful territories of the Sept, the Tsimshian-speaking people. My father's side of the family has been here since time immemorial, and it really is a beautiful place, and it's a beautiful place I've had the honor of representing for the past 3.5 years. We face this crisis in front of us. We've been dealing with a climate crisis. We have had since 2016 a public health emergency on an overdose crisis, and we have most recently been dealing with COVID-19, another health crisis. And I think one of the similarities between all three of these is visibility. Am I frozen? Is everybody frozen? Everybody seems to be very, very stoic and frozen.
We can hear you loud and clear, Adam.
All right. Is visibility. You know, for the overdose crisis, the stigma of addictions has rendered there's some visibility issues, mostly in dealing with people with addictions in the privacy of their home, not wanting to talk about it publicly. The climate crisis has been this slow-moving challenge that we've been facing. And that we've been trying to increase awareness of over a long period of time that needs swift action. And the invisible virus that has in a very short term really captured people's attention. And we've seen the action on COVID that I would love to see for the overdose crisis and the climate crisis that we're facing. I want to raise up the comment that Chief Planis made with respect to what we value. I think if I was to reach back into the teachings of our Coast Salish relatives, that the value of things was put on living things. I think modern days, the value is put on things that we can harvest and things when they're dead. And so, and how much can we make from it? And so I think what's really important, if I was to say, to sum it up for one point for me, and I really do hear saying, because in large part, and local government's ability to deal with things relies on the provincial government. So I think that a lot of this comes to governance. It comes down to stretching our imagination past four-year election cycles. It includes youth votes, and I think it is about investing in governance and making sure that people have trust in the election, have trust in the elected officials, and really standing up against anything that erodes the confidence in governance, because I think as we toil away in these very short-term election cycles of 4 years, and I think that it's really harming our ability to have a just recovery, or have a just plan over the long term, which is really, I think, the Indigenous perspective that needs to be brought into this.
Thanks, Mr. Olsen. Everyone brought up some interesting points. Abby, would you like to read the first question?
Yeah, thank you, Tamara. Here is the first question. What kind of industries or careers do you see as suited to a green and just economy for our youth? And how will your government support young people with education and job choices that are suited to those areas?
Chief Planus, we'll start with you again, and I think each panelist will have about 3 to 4 minutes.
Does everybody hear me? Perfect. Okay. Here's a couple of things that come to mind, and that is we are the salmon people. Our livelihood came from the sea. We spent more time on the water than we did at land at one time. I think we need to get back to that. I think the Creator gave us some gifts, and those gifts we haven't been taken advantage of. I think with new innovation and new technology, I think working with the youth, they're gonna get those skills and the new innovation that we never had a chance to when we were young. And if we were to match that with some of the resources we have within all our territories, I think we could look into a new economy that makes a lot of practical sense. I live in the village of Sayosin. Sayosin means the sounds the pebbles make when they're being washed up on our shores. I get to hear that when the tide's coming in. That is a gift that was handed down to us. I look out into the water where I live, and there is a kelp forest. And that kelp forest, it does a lot for our people. It does a lot for all living things within our territory. We're dependent on that kelp forest. I think we never really looked at and explored what potential there is in regards to a food source that would really propel us. And considering that we do live on an island, we do get our food brought to us by trucks that rely on fossil fuels. I think if we really get creative, as for say First Nations, there's over 50 on Vancouver Island alone, and we all work together with municipalities, we should look at what resources we have and be able to use them in a good way. We grow oysters in our basin right now. And why are we growing oysters? Well, we can help the Olympic oyster. It's at risk. Those are the ways we have to look at things, is we need to invest in the environment, and maybe we use the environment to do that. And it's our kids. Our livelihood are our kids. Our kids are the ones that'll make that shift. I'm just thinking that alone, you know, will create a new economy of scale. And also at the same time, you can look how just looking at something like kelp can heal the planet. And we don't think about that as people that, I shouldn't say we don't think about it. I think we don't look at that close enough, because if we did, we would be able to build on an economy that's right in front of us. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Heishka.
Thank you, Chief Planis. Next, we'll go to Mayor Helps with the same question.
Well, it's remarkable. So for the people who are listening, we had no pre-prep. We got the questions in advance, but I had no idea what Chief Planis was going to say, and I'm actually going to say the exact same thing with a little bit of inflection. So one of the most exciting projects that the City of Victoria is working on right now is the creation of an Ocean Futures Innovation Hub, which is meant to help achieve UN Sustainable Development Goal number 14, which is life underwater. It's meant to, exactly as the chief said, draw on the resources we have right here in front of us, work with First Nations, work with youth, work with anyone who has a keen interest in having a job that's going to pay well, because ocean jobs do, but also that's going to move us in the right direction in terms of everything from carbon capture. There's some really amazing technology right now that's drawing carbon. It's in its test phase, drawing carbon out of the atmosphere and injecting it into the ocean floor where it stays safe. So I really think that the oceans are a huge piece of our future, our economic future, our future in terms of inclusivity and equity that I mentioned earlier. And I just, Chief, I wanted to thank you for raising that, and I'm going to send you, when we get off this call, an invitation with respect to the Ocean Futures Innovation Hub. This is a real live project right now. We've engaged a company from BC as well as a company from Norway to help us develop this, so that by next summer we have this hub open that's going to open up huge opportunities for jobs, for training, but I don't want to say most importantly, because jobs and training are obviously important, and really importantly, the kinds of jobs that are going to leave the oceans cleaner and more sustainable over the next 7 generations. So thanks, Chief, and I couldn't agree more. The oceans are a key piece of our future here for jobs and for youth, and particularly at the city, that's a concrete project we're working on. So if anyone's interested in learning more, you can email me, because the question is, what is the city going to do? And that's one of the things we're doing.
Thanks, Mayor Helps. Mr. Olsen, please go ahead with your answer to that same question. How can the provincial government help our youth with their education and job choices that will be suitable to the new, green, just economy?
If you've been following any of the work that I've done over the last few years, then you might think that I'd be very inclined to just spend the next 3 to 4 minutes talking about salmon, because it's been a major part of the work that I did. And I think, just to add emphasis to again to what Chief Planis and Mayor Helps has said, it's all about perspective, and when you take a look at the natural world around us and you view it as a resource, you miss the opportunity to view them as to view each of these as relatives. And I think that that's a perspective that perhaps would have been better placed in the first part of my opening statement. I'll just say this: I think the really easy answer to say here is, clean energy and technology. And if you take a look at some of the work that we've done over the last 3.5 years, proposals that the BC Green Party put on into the election back in 2017 on the Emerging Economy Task Force and the Innovation Commissioner, one of the things that we've really done in this province is focused on being hewers of wood and drawers of water rather than on innovators, and taking a look at the different areas that we can really grow new industries so that we're not just hammering the environment like we have almost exclusively for the past 160 years since those first boats started to show up on the shores, because there's been no balanced approach to how we've interacted with the environment. I think I want to just add emphasis to the fact that we need, and we put this forward as major points in our green plan, was we need to make sure that we create resilience in our local supply chains that include that, and that's mostly a lot of products, a lot of manufacturing locally, products that we need and that we rely on, not the least of which food, both on land and in water. Not a big fan of fish farms in the ocean, but I can tell you there's lots of aspects of aquaculture, as Chief Planist pointed out. There's a company in my riding here in Saanich North in the Islands called Cascadia Seaweed that's looking at ways that we can build those markets. And finally, I'll just end with this. I think one of the aspects that we raised with the government for the plan was we need to get back in nature. I actually think I stole a line from Torrance Costa when I said that we've been hammering nature for so long. We have been. And what we need to do is we need to start to invest heavily in habitat restoration. There's a long history in this province of people growing up and spending a certain amount of time out in nature planting trees. When you take a look at the marine resources or the marine industries that both the chief and the mayor have talked about, a lot of that starts upland and deep in the heart of the province. And if we're just continuing to harvest trees like they grow on trees, or we just continue to harvest trees like there's an endless supply of them, like we have been, what ends up at the ocean, at the end of those streams in the deltas, is a big mess. And that's exactly what we're seeing with our salmon and with other species. So I think we put forward an idea of developing a conservation corps to 60,000 jobs in front of, and we wanted it to be done this summer. It didn't get done, but I think that from a long-term perspective, really reconnecting with nature by creating jobs and creating exciting opportunities to spend a summer out in nature, reconnecting, understanding, and being able to speak to it. I can tell you there's a generation of retired folks in my riding that have met with me over the last 3.5 years who've worked in BC environment, worked in BC parks, worked in BC forestry, that have come and talked to me and lamented the fact that we don't have these conservation kind of courses, there's this growing disconnect between the generations now and future generations and the environment. I think that this long way helping really strengthen and in some cases make that connection for the first time.
Thanks everyone for your answers. I think we know our youth will need our help to navigate this quickly changing world. I'll hand it over to Abby for the next question.
Our next question is, the IPCC has recommended reducing emissions by 45% by 2030. What immediate economic actions can your government do to accelerate the reduction of GHG emissions? If there is no easy answer, can there be task forces to look for fast, easy wins while the big problems and changes are grappled with?
Does everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just want to ensure before I start. I think from that question there, I think it's important to note we don't want to be bogged down by red tape. When you think about adverse effects to the environment, for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. I know it's important that we have to look at everything we do very closely, that there's no adverse effects on Mother Earth. At the same time, if we are going to talk about a recovery and talk about healing, we need to look at the growing cycles. If we're going to invest in the environment, if we're going to invest in our youth, we got to realize that we don't want to miss out on opportunity that might be right in front of us. So if the governments of the day, say the province and the federal government, you know, they need to understand that if there is an opportunity for a growing cycle, may it be different elements, different things, we need to take advantage of it, and we need to take advantage of it now. I just see that in the future, if we really know how our area breathes, the tide breathes. It goes all the way inside Vancouver Island, all the way up to Cortez, and then it comes back again. And with it, it brings all vibrant life with it. And I think we need to really get down and understand what we all have in our territories. And also, you know, like when you think about when I was growing up, we always thought the forests were created all these jobs. We call it timber forest licenses. And our people called them food forests. So I think we need to really change the way we look at the environment, because we were dependent on that food, not only the forest for food, but also our medicines. And maybe we should be looking at it in a different sort of way. And you know, what I worry about with the environment right now is because there is impacts of everything we do in our lives. And we think about bioplastics, and we think about the bioplastics that go into the water, and they harm the mammals and all the living creatures within the ocean environment. And the reason I was so curious about kelp, number one, I'm looking at it every day. Number two, I'm hearing from other First Nations that they are working with companies like Cascadia to look into a grow cycle of kelp. But the other thing that I really appeals to me is that bioplastics that can be made from kelp. So if they're absorbed by a whale, I think the whale will like that. So that is something that our youth have to push for. If I had a bag or something that I have to bring my groceries home, and I know it has to go somewhere, if it's a landfill or somewhere else, and I know it's going to get absorbed over time, then I think if it's absorbed, I feel a lot better when I go to sleep at night, knowing that I'm not contributing to hurting Mother Earth. So I think that's where we got to go. And with the young people, I think we're going to do it. I really do, because they're the next. And I think we're going to get some really good innovation and new technology that's going to help us get there. And we're getting very close. So thank you, Aishka.
Thank you, Chief Planus. Mayor Helps, what can a single municipality do to quickly decrease GHG emissions or work to solve more complex problems and changes?
Well, a single municipality can't do very much without our residents and businesses with us. And with our residents and businesses with us, we can do a lot. And again, I'll just outline some of the things that we've been working on. One of the most visible and controversial is obviously the bike lanes. When we've got the 32-kilometer network installed, that's going to reduce GHG emissions in the city by 10,000 tons per year. So that's significant. Just sorry to back up a bit, in the city of Victoria, and it's different for the region, but in the city of Victoria, the GHG emissions, 50% come from buildings, 40% comes from transportation, and 10% comes from waste. So we know really clearly, and again, I think it's on page 17 of our climate leadership plan. I put the links in the chat. If you download that, you'll see the various percentages that decrease by the actions that we take. So none of these are sexy. The bike lanes are very sexy, but they're not without controversy. But things like removing oil tanks from commercial and residential buildings. It's a simple act, that alone will decrease our emissions in the city by 16%. So what we did is we created a really heavy incentive program. It used to be $250 from the city and a little bit from the province. Anyways, we've created an incentive program that I think the total incentives, it adds up to $5,300 to remove your oil tank and go to heat pump. That's something that any single family homeowner can do. You know, again, that's with people with the opportunity who live in single family homes. But buildings, multi-unit residential buildings are another huge emitter. And so our staff have created this really great program. It's called the MARS program. I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but the idea is to work with rental building owners who own some of the older stock, which is, you know, by its very nature, a little bit more affordable than the newer stuff, and work with them to develop incentives to seismically upgrade the buildings, to energy retrofit the buildings, and to keep the buildings affordable at the same time. Because often, as we all know, when landlords make these kind of renovations, it's good for the environment, but not so good for the existing tenants. So the MARS program is looking for a couple of pilot buildings to do this kind of thing. And that way it talks to that equity piece, making sure no one's getting evicted. And in the end, energy bills go down because the building is more energy efficient. So these are all really practical things. Cities are very practical places. The other one with respect to waste, I'm trying to give examples from each of them. Again, you'd think that this was complicated or simple, but it's quite complicated. So as you're walking through Victoria, you'll see some beautiful new waste bins. There's the green, there's the recycle. Oh, I see our zero waste friends nodding from the Zero Waste Emporium. So we finally have these 3 bins where you can put your stuff in the right place. You wouldn't believe how complex it was just to design the bins so that people actually throw stuff in the right place. Like, we are so lazy as humans. So we can't do it without, we can put the bins there, but it took a lot of research to make sure we got them right. So again, that's an example that we're taking, something we're doing right now to reduce our emissions. So again, if you want more details, read the Climate Leadership Plan. We're committed to 100% renewable by 2050. We declared a climate emergency, and there's a lot in there. I think, you know, in the city, by working really hard, we can achieve that 45% by 2030, but hopefully we can exceed it. But the city, like our own emissions, the city's own emissions are only 1%. Like, our corporate emissions are 1%. So that means 99% relies on us working with everybody in the community to actually do the work together. So hopefully that's a helpful answer.
Thank you, Mayor Helps. Mr. Olsen, the province has access to funds that can help make big changes to decrease emissions. How will you work to do that?
Well, I think the first thing that needs to be said is that we need to stop subsidizing fossil fuels. So much of your money, of our money collectively, goes to subsidizing fossil fuels. We created, over the last 3.5 years, a plan has been created called Clean BC. And in some respects, it's fantastic. In other respects, it has provided cover for some of the highest subsidies of fossil fuel or of fossil fuels in more than the previous government. So while that plan is great and it starts to set us on a new direction, I think it's important that we don't allow it to be used as cover to kind of paper over the fact that we've got a massive LNG plant being built on the North Coast. We've got a massive pipeline being dragged across Indigenous territories and across the North. And that's going to increase fracking. And we need to be honest about this conversation. And unfortunately, we've not, the public narrative about LNG, about fossil fuel subsidies has not been an honest one. It's basically just a massive corporate welfare program that if it was ended and those fossil fuel companies had to survive on their own, then perhaps we could actually get on with the transition that is so often used as a way to kind of deflect people's attention. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to reinstate with great haste the carbon tax increases that have been put on pause during COVID-19, and we need to make sure that we're committed to that, that we continue to raise the carbon tax each year as has been committed, because it is the signal that sends to the market that we're serious about this. When the carbon tax was one of the first things jettisoned from COVID, what that did was it sent a message that this is just some fly-by-night program, and it doesn't, it's not meaningful. It is meaningful, and it's a very important tool that sends a message to industry and to people in the province. I think that we need to also have a very thorough and in-depth discussion about energy policy in our province, and that includes the big crown. BC Hydro will have a big part of this. No government in the province has been willing to dig in to BC Hydro. It's time that we have a government that's willing to dig into BC Hydro, and let's not wait till it gets to ICBC kind of status before we start to reform that big crown. And we simply cannot have our energy utility acting like it's 1950. I'm sorry, it's just not. There's one policy in which I think the provincial government started to implement, or at least they're starting to implement in the COVID recovery. It's PACE, and this is property assessed climate action. And this is where the provincial government can help local governments and can attract private investment into improving properties, those retrofits, making sure windows are up to date, doors. And I think that this is a really great opportunity, not just for public money, but also for private investment to go into people's homes, and that investment then improves the energy efficiency of those buildings, and the debt or the cost of that gets carried with the property, not with the mortgage. So when you sell the property, it gets recovered through property taxes, and we've been really advocating strongly all year for that to happen. I will leave. I want to just mention transportation. Absolutely one of the most important ways that we can, and of course, Clean BC is great. And if we want to pat ourselves on the back for going 75% of the way, then that's fantastic. I don't think it's done yet. We still got to find 25% of those greenhouse gas reductions in order to have a plan that actually does what it suggests that it's doing. And transportation is going to be a massive part of that. And so the government, the provincial government, needs to get real about how we are investing in mass transit, how we're investing in bus systems and light rail, or whatever the systems are that are applicable and appropriate for the various areas. We need to get on with it and stop pretending like we're doing something and start doing it.
Thanks, everyone. We're hearing a lot of good ideas. Abby, would you like to read the last question?
Yeah. The last question is this. How will your government support women, Indigenous workers, displaced workers, and vulnerable populations in a green and just manner as we begin to recover from COVID-19?
Thanks, Abby. Chief Planets, will begin again with you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say that I think it's an investment in ourselves. I think if we were to look ahead 100 years, we would be thinking about our children and what kind of life we're going to have for them, but also all people that live within our territory. How can we adjust? How can we prepare? How do we do this together? And when we're thinking about that, a couple of things will happen. And that is we'll be looking at different places around the world to look at success. And we'll be asking that question, how did they do that? And I think in today's age, we call it the information age. We're able to communicate like we never ever did before. And I think we need to take advantage of that. And when I talk about an investment in people, that also means it has to be a community-driven process in a way that we can learn how to adapt, and we can learn how to do things outside the box. I know that this is going to be a transition, and the only way that's going to happen is if we all buy into it. And I think that's really important, because in our old way of our ancestors, our Coast Salish laws is we all took care of each other and we never leave anyone behind. And I think that's a really important component of all this. And when I say that, that means today we need to measure what we have, so we know what we need to do tomorrow. And then we learn from it and we make it better and we bring it into the school systems. And if we measure it right, our children will know what to do. So thank you, Haishka.
Thank you, Chief Planis. Mayor Helps. How will the city help support vulnerable groups, women, Indigenous workers, and displaced workers affected by the pandemic?
Great, thank you for that question. I'm going to give three answers. I'll try and make them pretty concise. So the first is in Victoria 3.0, which is our economic recovery plan. And the subtitle is Recovery, Reinvention, and Resilience. There are a number of sections in there, and one is about what the city can do to support youth in the economy, and that was built from a group of youth who we engaged to tell us. The other is how do we, a section on supporting Indigenous entrepreneurship. And again, we engaged Indigenous communities to get that input. And then the third is supporting newcomers in the economy. So those are concrete actions in Victoria 3.0. Right now, we're working across the region on a plan that's being led by the South Island Prosperity Partnership, and they're also creating a regional recovery strategy. And there have been 11 sector committees that are working on putting this together. And there's been a First Nations sector committee and then an inclusive economy sector committee. And I would say that those two sector committees have really fed in across the 9 others to make sure that as we recover as a region, there are actions in that plan. So things like micro-credentialing for Indigenous communities. You know, people might not want to go to or have time or expense to go to UVic for 4 years, but maybe there's a quick skill that they could learn if UVic, Camosun, and Rural Roads came together to offer it. So again, those are really detailed, concrete answers, but the regional recovery strategy will have that inclusive lens throughout it, because we know in our region that it is those groups that you've mentioned that have been hardest hit. So those are two things coming directly out of COVID. One thing that's been already in existence for a couple of years that the City of Victoria is working on with all of the other local governments in the island and coastal communities region, so all the way up and down the island and on the Sunshine Coast. And I'll share the link once I'm done talking. It's called the Coastal Community Social Procurement Initiative. And it's so powerful and so simple. We spend a lot of money as local governments, you know, on everything from pencils to catering to construction. Well, we don't really probably buy pencils anymore, do we? But anyway, you get the gist. To catering, construction, and what we now have 22 member local governments in this CCSPI is what it's called for short. And so we're all using our local government spend to, you know, as we're hiring someone, for example, to do a road contract, we'll say, okay, well, you can have this contract, but how many Indigenous people are you going to employ and train? How many women are you going to employ and train? So, and each community up and down the island is setting their own goals for who they're trying to help and what they're trying to achieve. But it's so powerful because it's money we're already spending. And you know, another part of that initiative is working with the nonprofit and social enterprise sector to get them ready to bid bid on city contracts. And again, not just the city of Victoria, we've got 22 local governments across the island and the coast. So that's, again, really powerful and concrete, and gets people that have otherwise been left behind into the economy, and it helps to build this just recovery. So those are my answers. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Helps. Mr. Olsen, how will the province justly allocate funds and programming to British Columbia workers such as women, Indigenous people, and vulnerable and displaced workers?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And again, I've got a lot of notes, but I think what I'm going to focus on is continuing and investing in the process of decolonization, because with it comes a lot of, with the colonial framework that we work under right now, comes a lot of baggage and a lot of, I'll just leave it at that. I think I need to highlight the fact that we should be taking a look at creating a universal basic income. We should be making sure that we have a living wage, and that we have some sophistication in that it's not just one number for every community in the province. We know that some communities, cost of living is higher, and in some communities than in other communities. What we need to make sure is that people can afford to live in the place that they live, and they can afford life. The cost of living continues to increase. We have affordability challenges that this past government tried it and made an attempt to address, and was successful in a bunch of different areas. But I think that there's still a long way to go. So I'll just circle back around the decolonization process, because I think I think we started this process in earnest, and it with the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People Act that was brought in back in November of 2019. And a lot of people as we went through that, it was like, this is just an initiative that we're doing on behalf of Indigenous people. And in the process, as we were going through it, I was the lead on this, and from our caucus perspective, and worked very closely with Minister Scott Fraser and Assistant Deputy Minister Jessica Wood on this. And what I learned from it was that actually the decolonization process and decolonization in our province is necessary for everybody. It goes all the way back to a lot of the foundational perspectives that we have about nature and our place here, and why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing. And I think a lot of the decision making that happens at the provincial government is informed by a lot of really old school thinking that needs a very serious renovation. In some cases, it needs to be torn straight down to the foundation. And again, so when we're talking about, I mean, this summer, for an example, we had a whole large number of hotel workers on the front lawns of the legislature, wanting the government to take action to protect their jobs. And while on one hand, we've got jobs being protected in northern British Columbia and man camps, so that the LNG pipeline can be continued to be built and fracking can continue to happen. On the other hand, jobs that were primarily undertaken by new immigrants to our country and women and Indigenous people, they were very much threatened. And it's just a perspective of that, you know, in some, it's the default position. And so I think for me, the most important thing that we can do is to continue to lean in to the decolonization process that has begun, to reconcile the perspectives that we've had from the past, noting that it's not going to be, and it is not acceptable now, nor will it be acceptable in the future. And it's not easy work, and it takes a lot of heat and a lot of criticism. But like bike lanes, we got to do it because it's really important. I got the smile back from Lisa. That's good. So we're even now.
Thank you, Mr. Olsen. All of you have given us a lot of good tools for addressing the crisis we find ourselves in. We will need to rely on you to help pull all of us through it and into a green, just future for everyone. That's all the time we have for today. A recording of this presentation will be made available on the For Our Kids YouTube page in the next few days, and we'll link to it from our website, which is forourkids.ca. If you are a parent or grandparent, we need your help. If you live in Victoria, we would love you to join Parents for Climate or For Our Grandkids. If you're outside Victoria, you can join one of our other For Our Kids teams or start your own. To learn more, please join us at our next welcome session this coming Tuesday, September 29th. You can sign up at www.forourkids.ca, and we'll also post the direct link in the chat now. Our welcome sessions are held every month, and they're a great opportunity to get to know For Our Kids organizers, to ask questions, and to share your story. Thank you so much for coming today. Take care, everyone.
Aishka.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Aishka.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Okay, in about a minute, I'm gonna just close this, actually boot all of you out who aren't organizers and moderators so we can have a really quick little post-event debrief. So for those of you I'm about to kick out, thank you so much for coming. And if you're scrambling to get the links, don't worry, we will send them out.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tamara. That was great. Oh, she's gone.
Oh, oh no.
So, somebody thank her later. Just a second here. Okay, and I'm going to unmute Curtis King, our old friend Curtis King. Just two more people. Okay, let's see. We got Abby, Erin, Catherine, Kate. Abby, Erin, Catherine, Kate, Lella. Great. All right, and there she is.
Hey.
Yay, everybody! Woo! Good job. That was a huge success.
Well done. Well done.
Oh, and now that we've said yay, I'm gonna stop the recording.
Oh,